Hi everyone, welcome back to the podcast. We don't have any ads today or even any intro music because I'm on the road and I forgot to send myself those audio files. So you're just getting the hacked together version of the podcast. Today I have a special guest, my mom, and she is coming to bring the boomer perspective to the Adventist Millennial Podcast. So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Okay, so first tell us your name.
My name is Rosalie Weber.
And tell us, what are your greatest hits? Some things about yourself.
Well, my greatest hits would probably be my 3 children, Aaron, John, and Emily. I'm lucky enough to be married to my best friend, Alan.
Cool. So, I guess my first question is, did you grow up Adventist?
Yes, I'm 3rd generation Adventist.
So, what was Adventism like for you growing up?
Well, as a kid, you don't really think much about the way you're growing up. You just think you're growing up like everybody else. And I grew up in a neighborhood where we were mostly Adventists. I went to Adventist schools. My mom worked in an Adventist hospital, so we were very tied to the church, and I thought that's how life was supposed to be.
So it doesn't sound like you'd questioned a lot, or did you?
No, my personality isn't very much a questioning person. I just pretty much did what was expected of me. I didn't have any problems. I'm a rules-oriented type of person, so as long as I understood what the rules are, I was okay with abiding with them. Didn't really question a whole lot.
So, you went to church a lot. You went to Pathfinders. You did all that stuff.
Yes. Did Pathfinders, went to church. Saturday nights we did roller skating at the school gym. So, very Adventist.
So, well, I guess a lot of complaints that I hear is how strict the rules are within Adventism. But I guess if you're a rules-oriented person, that didn't bother you that much.
No,
you never felt like there were a lot of rules involved in religion?
I guess I did, deep down inside, because they surfaced when I got older and started asking questions. But as a kid, no, I never really asked a whole lot of questions. We had morning and evening worship every single day. I did question the validity of them because they were pretty much just like a culture thing. It didn't really help me, encourage me to ask any questions. We just read the lesson. There was no discussion. We sang, we read the lesson, we prayed, and that was it.
So while you didn't have any questions, it also didn't necessarily have a lot of meaning to you, or?
Well, it was very cultural. I would say that. There were things that were appropriate to do, things that weren't appropriate to do. I went to church to see my friends, not necessarily to gain an understanding of God. It was just the thing to do. It was the expected thing to do.
So then you said when you got older, some questions started coming up. When was that, and what kinds of questions were they?
Well, they started coming up when I started noticing my friends, veering from the routine, I guess you could say, of going to church. Probably the questions came when I was in college. I started dating my now husband, and he is a very analytical person, and he had lots of questions, and we would talk about those, and during those talks, I would think, Those are questions I have deep down inside, but never was brave enough to actually ask them. But I realized when he would bring them up that they were questions I had. I just had never articulated them.
So that's interesting. Can you think of anything specifically?
I know for sure. By the time I was 15, I was baptized when I was 13. By the time I was 15 or 16, I had told myself that marrying a non-Adventist was a non-negotiable thing. So I knew I had to marry an Adventist.
Why did you?
I don't know if it's because I knew that my parents would probably disapprove if I did, but I liked the culture. I enjoyed the people I was around and with, and Sabbath was a non-negotiable thing I was going to give up. That was real important to me, even though at home we never really talked about God, his character, and trying to make sense of him and why we were doing the things we did. But I understood that the Sabbath was an important thing, and that was something that I wasn't going to give up. So it was really important to me to date an Adventist because I wasn't gonna go to church by myself, and whenever I had a family, I was not gonna go to church by myself.
Okay, so a lot of millennials, people my age, are getting really frustrated with the church because of, partly I think it's the sort of strict rules, and partly I think it's kind of the mentality of this generation of not liking establishments and things like that. But a lot of people have either left or have wanted to leave the church. Did you ever feel like that in your life?
I think about this sometimes. I think if I had married somebody else, somebody who was like me, that was just a cultural Adventist, I would think I probably, if I didn't leave the church, I probably wouldn't be going on a regular basis, because it was just a culture thing. There wasn't really anything. Probably the only thing that would have held me back was hurting my mom's feelings that I quit going to church. But as far as something that really meant that I owned about Adventism, I didn't have that, except for the fact that I married Alan, who had lots of questions, and because he had lots of questions, we had lots of discussions and talked about why and things about God's character that didn't make sense. And as those things came to the surface, trying to understand God in a better way, in a way that made sense and not just a person that required us to do something, and if we didn't do it, watch out. And I realized that the picture that we paint so often of a God who, as long as you do what he says, he's fine, but watch out, boy, if you disobey the rules or decide that you didn't want him in your life, at the end he's going to do something to you. And that really didn't settle real well with me. I started realizing, we don't accept somebody like that. Any friends, any relationships here who would treat us like that, why would it be okay for God to treat us like that? There's something that didn't make sense. And when I started hearing things like, that isn't what God does, and if he did, it's no wonder people, my friends, lots of my classmates are no longer in the church. It's no wonder they left. Why would you want to trust somebody that would do that, force you into a relationship without giving you anything to trust about them? when I started realizing that and started maybe thinking about other ways that God could be presented or has been mispresented and misunderstood, he became attractive to me, and I wanted a relationship with him.
So, you mentioned that a lot of your friends and people that you know your age have also left the church too. It's not just my generation. Do you think that's justified? If we're misunderstanding something important, is it justified for people to want to leave?
Well, if something doesn't make sense, if religion doesn't make sense, and God looks like an ogre why would you want to spend, even if you got to go to heaven, why would you want to be in heaven with somebody that wasn't really that likable? The whole thing just kind of falls apart. I can see why millennials and my friends have left, because if something doesn't make sense, things have to make sense. You can't just accept something that underneath it all you're like, it doesn't make sense, but they say God's love, and if you're afraid and just do the things because you're afraid, it doesn't end real well.
You said you didn't necessarily articulate all those questions on your own. For people who don't necessarily, maybe they take issue with the restrictive culture. Maybe it's not necessarily that it doesn't make sense to them. Like, for example, maybe your brothers, do you feel like you had the same attitudes growing up as kids? And do you think that you changed in some way?
Yeah, I don't know. It was something that we never really discussed.
What was it?
Why they quit going to church, or why it wasn't that important for them. I can't speak for them, for how they were, what they thought of growing up, but my sense was, or is, that they also were cultural Adventists. If you're just a cultural Adventist, you wake up one day and you think, why am I getting up and going to church when it's just for show, or to see friends? I can see them any other time besides church. Or if your friends have all gone away and there's nobody to connect to, what's the point? Especially when you start having a family, it's such a big inconvenience to have to dress everybody, get up early especially if you're a working parent, having a day off, having to dress all the kids and get yourself ready early to get to church on time. For what? There really comes a time when it just seems so pointless.
That's a good segue into how your attitude with us growing up. Like, we always went to church and stuff. Was it culturally important and that's why, or was there, at that point, why did you go through all the pain of especially getting me dressed?
Yes.
So what was your attitude for having us grow up Adventist?
Even though I had questions, and it was still, the alternative was worse for me. I didn't have all my questions answered, but I did want you to have good memories of going to church, and hopefully being able to relate the knowledge of God and religion in correspondence with your age, and trying to answer, your questions, instead of just saying, no, this is the way we do things and we just do them.
Even when we were little kids? Because when I was a kid, I felt like it was. That's just the way we do things.
Well, yeah, when you're a kid, there's not a whole lot of discussion that you can have. I mean, it did and start out to be just a culture thing for you guys. I wanted you to get used to going to church. Plus, I was still a cultural Adventist, even though I had questions, and I never got to the point where I thought it was pointless. Where I think my friends who quit going to church, I think finally, at least that's what I think, that they finally decided, what's the point? I never reached that, but if I had not gotten some questions answered, I probably would have reached that point.
Yeah, because I feel like when I was growing up, a lot of my friends, like families, went to church when the kids were young, but then by the time, high school or college, whatever, the whole family would just kind of stop going. And I feel like there are like sections of life when I've seen people I know quit going is like right around college and just after college, when you don't have kids yet and you are just like, forget this.
Yeah, because nobody, I mean, your parents can't make you go anymore.
Yeah.
It's your decision.
So the parents are making the kids go as the kids, and then the kids are making their parents go as their kids. Because a lot of people want to take their kids to church when they're kids. But then, I don't know, if you don't have really good, important reasons, I guess it's pretty easy to stop. Okay, so we kind of have talked about this a little bit, but how have your perspectives changed over the years? Do you still have questions? Are there any questions that you feel like you've had answered?
Of course I still have questions, and am constantly trying to come up with more questions. I mean, God is infinite. I wanna know Him better and better every day, and of course I'm gonna have questions. But the important ones, the big ones, I hope that I've matured enough so that even when bad things happen, instead of blaming God or being tempted to say, well, He must not be that interested in me, or I must have done something so that He's turned His back on me. I sure hope that I'm past that and can be confident that I'll hang on tighter when things don't always go the way I want them to go. I mean, it's so easy to believe in God when things are going your way. It's another story when tragedies happen.
Yeah. Are there any things that you feel like, any perspectives you feel like that have changed for you?
Yeah, the biggest perspective is it's not about Losalie. It's about God. It's always about God. When I start thinking about Losalie, I can go down so many rabbit holes that'll pull me down. I have to constantly say, look up, Losalie. It's not about you. And another aha moment for me is realizing how selfish I am and that God's universe is unselfish. That's how He wants to run His universe, and how attractive that is to me. And yet I'm so selfish, and realize how thankful I am that God wants to change my heart, and that He can do that. Even though I realize how selfish I am.
One of the things that I've heard people my age complain about is that there doesn't seem like there's a lot of community in the church. What do you think about that? Do you think it's true?
Yes, I think that is true. Part of it, I think, is because we're afraid to be real with each other. I know for me, I'm afraid to be real with people around me because I don't want them to judge me. I don't want them to feel sorry for me. I don't want them to gossip about me. I don't know how to get past that with each other. I guess you just have to...
So you think it has to do with trust?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think we trust each other to lay our burdens on each other. That's a big thing for me. Another thing is also putting yourself out there and then maybe not seeing results, and so you're like, well, I'm putting all this work and I'm not really seeing anything, any benefits to anybody, so am I just spinning my wheels? And I think that's the wrong attitude to have. Not everybody's going to respond to you, and I think we just need to keep trying, and that's what I have to keep telling myself. I don't know if I've touched anybody's life in a positive way, but I need to just keep trying and not give up, because there have been days when I come to church and just somebody saying a kind word or somebody showing concern made me feel like I mattered. And so I have to think, hopefully I do that for somebody else too.
Yeah. So coming from the boomer perspective and watching me and my brothers grow up, I feel like looking back at my own life, the journey was kind of similar to you. As a little kid, it was just like, this is the way it is, and that's fine, and I liked church and all that. And then I got a little older, and I've talked about this on the podcast, and I got super kind of fundamentalist and conservative, and then by the time I got to college, I was like, forget all this. So were there any of those times that you noticed, or like, were you ever afraid, I guess, for me, or how did you see my journey, I guess, as I was growing up?
Well, it's interesting hearing you talk about that, because I don't know, maybe I was a bad mother, but I wasn't that in tuned with that. And I have to credit your dad, I really do. I think it's really true that whoever you watch and model after, that's what you end up doing. And my parents, I probably would have, I know I would have used their same approach with you kids as my folks did when it came to religion. It's just, that's just the way we do it. And even though I say, hopefully I would make it more meaningful for you, but you can only do what you've seen modeled for you. It's really hard to change from that. And I'm very, very thankful for your dad, because I think he gets most of the credit for that, because he was aware and tried to get you guys to think more.
Yeah.
Whereas I was too busy cleaning or something.
Yeah, but you were good about making us learn our memory verse. So, what would you say to millennials who are having serious doubts or questions, or like coming to their last straw with Adventism? What would you say?
Ask questions, and keep asking questions, and hopefully us older generation folks, the boomers, will listen to those questions and try to answer them, and not answer them with pat answers like we got, but dialogue about those questions. And I don't know if millennials have questions. I don't know.
So then you'll host a Q&A where people can ask you their questions?
Well, as a boomer, I want to connect with millennials. Well, I want to connect with millennials. I'm just not sure how to do it so that it's meaningful for them.
So, send in your questions for my mom. And she'll answer them. Or maybe you could have like an advice column or something.
I don't know if I would be good.
Or if you want to learn how to cook or sew,
or
get
garden.
in touch with or clean it appropriately.
Yes, tips on cleaning.
Oh, well, that is a point. People my age are always like, how come nobody taught us in school, like, how to, do our taxes and do laundry and all that kind of thing. So if you need any home ec training, you know where to go. Okay, so if you want to get in touch, you can email me at adventistmillennial@gmail.com, or you can message me on Facebook or Instagram at SDAMillennial. Comments, questions, critiques, flames, gifs, memes, any of that stuff, send it over. And we'll see you guys next year, because this is the last episode of the year. Thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for inviting me.
And thank you for... Well, I was going to say thank you for forcing me to memorize, but I don't know that I'm necessarily thankful. Okay, bye everyone.